The government's being accused of seriously compromising the integrity of its flagship fees-free tertiary policy because it was put in place in such a rush. The penalty for students who try to rort the scheme has been significantly scaled back to a fine of up to $5,000 from an original penalty of up to 3 years in jail. The Labor policy for 3 free years of educational training for first-time tertiary students with an annual value of up to $12,000 is being progressively rolled out from this year. Here is our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Officials have previously warned the free fees scheme could be open to abuse, pointing out the government holds no records of prior study from before 2003 or from overseas. A cabinet paper shows the government will now change the law to allow students in the future to simply sign an ordinary declaration, which does not require a witness, with a much lower penalty for the breach. That also means education authorities can penalise students who falsely claim the free fees without having to rely on a police investigation. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins says the original plan was too costly and complex.
The change that we've made, or that we will be making in the legislation, is bringing this into line with other comparable offences and also making the system easier to administer. At the moment, to do a statutory declaration, someone has to get that signed by a JP. They'll now still have to sign a declaration, but they won't have to have it signed by a JP.
National's tertiary spokesperson Paul Goldsmith says these problems have arisen as the policy has been so rushed and ill-considered. He says Mr Hipkins had repeatedly assured the public students could face serious ramifications if they lied on a statutory declaration, but now it's basically an honesty box system.
Now, anybody who lives in Auckland knows that there are many thousands of people who have come from overseas, may have studied overseas. There's no way of knowing whether they have studied or not. So it relies on their honesty. And frankly, there hasn't been any indication that the government has given serious thought to how to maintain the integrity of the system.
The ACT leader David Seymour says the fact the government has made these changes is recognition the scheme is vulnerable to fraud.
By softening the penalties, they're sending a signal that the government doesn't really care if you rort taxpayer money, and giving such a meagre penalty, often less than the cost of the goods that you're effectively stealing, they're just reinforcing the point. We're open for business. This is Jacinda Ardern's Rorts Are Us policy.
The president of the New Zealand Union of Students Association, Jonathan Gee, says not having to make a declaration to a GP will make it easier for students to access tertiary education, the whole point of the policy. And he says while no one should rort the system, a 3-year prison sentence may have been a bit harsh.
I wonder actually if that went through the courts, how many would actually go to jail as a result of rorting the system. So that would have been very interesting to see, I guess, how palatable judges would have found or what sort of penalty they would have applied. I think the $5,000 is a sufficient deterrent in terms of stopping people from rorting the system.
These students at Victoria University thought $5,000 was an adequate fine.
I mean, it's really harsh on the student, and I think, I don't think it would really get what it's aimed to do.
Yeah, from the perspective of, student finances are pretty slim as it is, so $5,000, that's no laughing matter in terms of fines.
I actually think it's more, particularly that age group, more not what's the consequence of getting caught, but what's the chance of me getting caught. That's going to influence it, in my opinion, more.
Legislation containing the change and stopping the creation of new charter schools has its first reading in Parliament today. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.